And this one's going to be a little bit trickier. For this one, we're going to say can edit a note. And the reason this is trickier is because editing a note actually has a debounce involved, so the user has to wait for 300 milliseconds after they finish typing before we actually send the update request. That way we're not sending an update request for every character they type. For this one, we need a user and a book still because we need to create a list item. But for this list item, we actually don't care about the finish date, so I'll get rid of that, and then we can just put all of this on one line. And then instead of clicking the mark as read button, we're actually going to create some new notes here. And we can say hello world, but hello world doesn't actually matter for the notes. So I'm going to generate this value. We'll come up here to the very top and we'll import faker from faker so we can fake out these notes. So we'll say faker lorem words. So just some random words for us. And then we'll get the notes text area with screen get by role text box name notes. And then we'll want to type in there. So first we need to use user event to clear the notes text area of what it had before. And then we'll say user event type in the notes text area the new notes. And then we'll wait for loading to finish and move on with the rest of our assertions here. So for the assertions, we can probably just expect the notes text area to have value, and that value should be the new notes. And then we don't really have any sort of indication in the UI that the update was actually successful. So what we're going to do is make an assertion that await list items db read list item.id. So we're going to read the actual list item that was saved into the database to match object. So it's an object that has these properties, and the property we care about is the notes. So we'll say new notes. So the object that's saved into the database should have the new notes that we typed in there after this loading state finishes. So let's save that and see what happens to our test. Oh dear. Okay, so here's what's going on. What the error is saying that, hey, wait for element to be removed double checks to make sure that the elements that you're waiting to be removed are actually in the document in the first place. And in our case, we don't have any loading indicators on the screen after the user types. We actually have that 300 millisecond delay before that loading indicator shows up on the screen. And so by the time we run this code, that loading indicator hasn't shown up yet. And so wait for element to be removed is just saying, hey, there's probably something wrong because you're waiting for these elements to be removed, but they were never in the document in the first place. So there's probably something else you need to wait for, or maybe you've got a typo or something. And so that's the case for us. We need to wait for the loading indicator to show up first. So here I can say await screen, find by label, text. We're going to look for the loading. So here we're going to wait for it to show up, and then here we'll wait for it to disappear. So let's save that and see if that is going to work for us. And no, we're still getting the same error. So that's interesting. We know for a fact that the loading indicator does show up, but then for some reason, when we get to this line of code, the loading indicator must be gone again. And that's actually what's happening. So the promise that comes back from find by label text resolves a little bit after the loading indicator shows up and then disappears immediately. So it shows up, we make the request resolves, it comes back, and the loading indicator goes away. And that all happens so fast that by the time we get to this wait for loading to finish, that loading indicator is already gone. And so what we're going to do here is just get rid of wait for loading to finish, and we'll simply just wait for this loading indicator to show up. And if we want to be extra doubly sure, we could actually add a wait for right here. So we could say await, wait for, and we can wait for this assertion to pass before we continue on with the rest of our assertions. But I actually feel okay with what we've got here, so we're going to leave it as is, and let's go ahead and review what we've got here now. So we wanted to make sure we can edit a note, so we needed a user and a book so we can create a list item. We render that with that user on that route, and then we create some random notes. We grab our notes text area, we clear the text area and type those new notes in there. We wait for the loading indicator to show up, and by that time our notes text area has been updated and the list item database has that list item actually updated.